What started as routine promotion turned into television chaos when Jennifer Aniston confronted Jimmy Kimmel about his controversial divorce jokes, leading to an explosive on-air meltdown that has Hollywood buzzing. The studio audience had no idea they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Jennifer Aniston walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live set with her trademark smile, waving to the cheering crowd as she settled into the guest chair. The interview was supposed to promote her latest streaming project, but within minutes, the atmosphere would shift from friendly banter to something far more sinister. Kimmel opened with his usual charm offensive, complimenting Aniston's appearance and making small talk about her recent projects. The audience laughed along as he cracked jokes about her character's romantic mishaps in her new show. But those who knew Kimmel's pattern could sense something brewing beneath his rehearsed pleasantries. His eyes held a glint that suggested he had prepared something special for tonight's interview. "So, Jennifer," Kimmel began, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes, "I have to ask about something that's been on everyone's minds lately. Your dating life has been quite the topic of conversation in Hollywood circles." The audience chuckled, expecting typical celebrity gossip fodder, but Aniston's expression immediately tightened. She had dealt with invasive questions about her personal life for decades, but something in Kimmel's tone felt different tonight. "Jimmy, you know I prefer to keep my private life private," she responded diplomatically, her media-trained smile wavering slightly. "I'm here to talk about my work." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. He had clearly done his research and seemed determined to push boundaries that other hosts had learned to respect. "Oh, come on, Jennifer, everyone knows about the recent drama. The tabloids have been having a field day with your love triangle situation," Kimmel pressed, his voice taking on a mocking edge that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I mean, at your age, don't you think it's time to settle down? The biological clock and all that?" The comment landed like a punch to the gut. Aniston's smile completely disappeared, replaced by a look of genuine hurt and anger. The audience fell silent, sensing they had crossed from entertainment into something much more personal and cruel. Kimmel had just referenced one of the most painful aspects of her public narrative, the constant scrutiny about her childless status and the assumptions about her personal choices. "Excuse me?" Aniston's voice was barely controlled, her professional composure cracking. "What exactly are you implying, Jimmy?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as the two locked eyes across the coffee table. Kimmel's production team behind the cameras began exchanging worried glances, recognizing that their host had ventured into dangerous territory. But instead of apologizing or backing away, Kimmel doubled down with a laugh that sounded forced and uncomfortable. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You've been Hollywood's eternal bachelorette for what, 20 years now? Maybe it's time to face reality about your situation." His words dripped with condescension, and the audience's uncomfortable silence grew more pronounced. The cameras continued, rolling as Aniston processed what had just happened. This wasn't playful celebrity roasting. This was personal humiliation disguised as comedy. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair as she fought to maintain her composure, but anyone watching could see the storm building behind her eyes. "You have absolutely no right to comment on my personal choices," she said, her voice gaining strength and edge. "And frankly, I'm shocked that someone in your position would think it's appropriate to mock a woman's reproductive choices on national television." The words came out measured but loaded with fury that had been building for years of similar encounters. Kimmel seemed to realize he had miscalculated, but his ego wouldn't let him retreat gracefully. Instead, he made the fatal decision that would define the rest of the evening. "Hey, relax. It's just comedy. If you can't handle a little joke, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." His dismissive tone and patronizing gesture toward her sent shockwaves through the studio. That's when something in Jennifer Aniston snapped completely, and the real confrontation was about to begin. The transformation was immediate and shocking. Aniston's carefully maintained Hollywood composure evaporated as she leaned forward in her chair, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "Just comedy?" she repeated, her tone dripping with incredulous rage. "You think attacking a woman's most personal struggles is comedy? You think decades of invasive speculation about my body and my choices is a punchline for your monologue?" The studio audience sat frozen, trapped between fascination and horror as they witnessed the dismantling of Kimmel's carefully constructed persona. Some pulled out their phones, recognizing they were watching television history unfold in real time. The cameras continued rolling, but the production team looked paralyzed, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the disaster play out. Kimmel's face flushed red as he realized his mistake, but his defensive instincts kicked in harder than his common sense. "Look, Jennifer, I didn't mean to offend you, but this is how late night works. We make jokes about celebrities. It's what people expect." His voice carried a whining quality that made him sound more like a scolded child than a seasoned television host. "Don't you dare patronize me," Aniston shot back, her voice rising with each word. "I've been doing this longer than you have, and I know the difference between professional comedy and personal cruelty. What you just did crossed every line of decency and respect." Her hands were trembling now, not from fear but from pure adrenaline-fueled anger. The tension in the studio reached a breaking point as Kimmel made his second catastrophic decision of the evening. Instead of apologizing sincerely, he turned to his audience with a theatrical shrug. "Ladies and gentlemen, I guess we've hit a nerve tonight," he said with a forced chuckle, trying to make Aniston the villain of her own humiliation. The audience's uncomfortable laughter was sparse and quickly died out as they sensed the genuine pain radiating from Aniston. But their tepid response only seemed to embolden Kimmel further. "Come on, Jennifer. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? It's not like I said anything that wasn't already in the tabloids." That comment proved to be the final straw. Aniston stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech that echoed through the now silent studio. "The fact that you think tabloid gossip justifies your behavior shows exactly what kind of person you really are," she said, her voice steady but loaded with contempt. "I've spent 30 years in this industry being professional, being gracious, and putting up with comments like yours because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to smile and laugh along while men like you make careers out of tearing us down." Her words carried the weight of decades of frustration, not just her own, but that of countless women in entertainment. Kimmel's face had gone from red to pale as he began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just a difficult interview anymore. This was a career-defining moment that could destroy his reputation. "Jennifer, please, let's just calm down and talk about this," he pleaded, his earlier cockiness completely abandoned. But Aniston was far from finished. "Calm down? You want me to calm down after you've humiliated me on national television?" Her voice cracked with emotion, revealing the genuine hurt beneath her anger. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have strangers constantly dissecting your personal life, making assumptions about your happiness, your worth as a woman?" The studio was so quiet that every breath seemed amplified. Kimmel's band members looked away uncomfortably, while his sidekick seemed to shrink into his chair. Even the usually chatty audience had fallen into complete silence, sensing they were witnessing something raw and unrehearsed. "I've given you respect from the moment I walked out here," Aniston continued, her voice gaining power with each word. "I've promoted your show. I've been gracious to your staff, and this is how you repay that courtesy? By ambushing me with personal attacks disguised as jokes?" Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Aniston cut him off with a gesture that silenced him completely. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "You know what the worst part is?" Aniston's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more impact than shouting. "You think you're entitled to my pain. You think my struggles are your content? My heartbreak is your material." She began pacing behind her chair, unable to contain the energy coursing through her. "But you've never had to endure what I have. You've never had your worth questioned because of your personal choices." The cameras captured every moment as Kimmel sat frozen, his usual quick wit completely abandoned. His writers in the booth were frantically scribbling notes, trying to come up with damage control, but nothing could salvage this disaster. The host, who had built his career on making others uncomfortable, was now experiencing that discomfort himself, and he clearly had no idea how to handle it. "I've watched you do this to other women," Aniston continued, her voice gaining momentum like a gathering storm. "You did it to Anne Hathaway about her relationships. You did it to Charlize Theron about her dating life. You think it's funny to reduce accomplished women to their romantic status, as if that's all we're worth discussing." Her words hit like accusations in a courtroom, each one backed by years of witnessed humiliation. The audience began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in recognition of the pattern she was describing. Several women in the crowd looked visibly moved by her words, while others appeared uncomfortable at being confronted with truths they had previously laughed along with. The atmosphere in the studio had become electric with tension and realization. Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a weak croak. "Jennifer, I think you're misunderstanding my intention here. I was just trying to have a conversation about—" But Aniston's laugh cut him off, a bitter sound that held no humor whatsoever. "A conversation," she repeated, her eyebrows raised, in disbelief. "Is that what you call ambushing someone with deeply personal attacks? Because I must have missed the part where you asked for my consent to discuss my reproductive choices on national television." Her sarcasm was razor-sharp, cutting through any remaining pretense of civility. The studio's tension reached a fever pitch as Aniston moved closer to Kimmel's desk, her presence commanding the entire space. "You want to know what's really pathetic? Jimmy? You punch down. You go after women because you know we're trained to take it gracefully. You'd never dare make these comments to a male guest because you know they'd walk out or punch you in the face." Kimmel's face had gone completely white now, sweat beading on his forehead as he realized the full scope of his mistake. His usual smugness had been replaced by genuine fear, not of physical confrontation, but of professional destruction. Every word Aniston spoke was being broadcast live, and he could practically feel his career crumbling in real time. "I've been nothing but professional with you," Aniston pressed on, her voice now steady and controlled, which somehow made her words even more devastating. "I came here to do my job, to promote my work, to be a good guest. And you repaid that professionalism by trying to humiliate me for entertainment." The production assistants backstage were in full panic mode, making frantic phone calls to network executives and legal teams. This was no longer just a difficult interview. This was a public relations catastrophe that would have ramifications far beyond tonight's show. The internet was already exploding with clips and commentary, turning the confrontation into a viral sensation. "You know what the saddest part is?" Aniston's voice cracked slightly, revealing the genuine emotion beneath. Her controlled anger. "I actually respected you once. I thought you were different from the others. I thought you understood that there's a line between comedy and cruelty." Her disappointment was perhaps more damaging than her anger had been. Kimmel made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Jennifer, please, can we just take a step back here? Maybe we got off on the wrong foot, but I never meant to." His words sounded hollow and rehearsed, like a politician's non-apology. "You never meant to what?" Aniston interrupted, her voice rising again. "You never meant to hurt me? You never meant to cross the line? Or you never meant to get caught doing what you do to women every single night on this show?" Her questions hung in the air like accusations, each one more damning than the last. The studio audience was completely silent now, some looking ashamed for having laughed earlier, others appearing angry at having been made complicit in what they now recognized as systematic harassment disguised as entertainment. The mood had shifted from uncomfortable to genuinely hostile, and Kimmel was clearly feeling the weight of their collective judgment. "You want to know what real comedy is, Jimmy?" Aniston's voice had found a dangerous calm that was more terrifying than her earlier anger. "Real comedy doesn't require tearing down women to get laughs. Real comedy doesn't feed off someone else's pain. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because your entire career has been built on cheap shots and low blows." The devastation in her words was absolute. Kimmel looked like a man watching his world collapse in slow motion. His hands shook slightly as he gripped his desk, searching desperately for something to say that might stop the bleeding. But Aniston wasn't finished delivering her verdict. "I've sat through thousands of interviews over my career," she continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally found her breaking point. "I've smiled through inappropriate questions, laughed at jokes at my expense, and played along with the game because that's what we're supposed to do. But not tonight. Tonight, I'm done pretending that this is acceptable." A few people in the audience began to clap slowly, their applause building as others joined in. It wasn't the manufactured enthusiasm of a typical talk show audience. This was genuine respect for someone finally saying what needed to be said. The sound seemed to give Aniston even more strength. "You've shown everyone watching exactly who you are," she said, gesturing toward the cameras that were still rolling. "You've revealed that behind all the jokes and the charm, you're just another man who thinks a woman's pain is your entertainment. And now everyone knows it." Kimmel made one final pathetic attempt to regain control. "Jennifer, I think we're both getting a little heated here. Maybe we should—" But his voice was drowned out by the growing murmur of approval from the audience, who were clearly on Aniston's side now. "No, Jimmy, we're not both anything," she cut him off with finality. "This is all you. This is your show, your choice to attack me, your decision to double down when you should have apologized. Own it." Her words hit like hammer blows, each one driving the final nails into the coffin of his credibility. The production team backstage was in complete chaos. Network executives were screaming into phones, lawyers were being summoned, and social media. Managers were watching helplessly as hashtags calling for Kimmel's firing began trending worldwide. The damage was spreading beyond the studio walls at lightning speed. Aniston took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders, transforming back into the consummate professional she had always been. But now that professionalism carried the weight of someone who had drawn a line in the sand. "I came here tonight to promote my work and to be a good guest. Instead, I've been forced to defend my basic human dignity on national television." She turned to address the audience directly, ignoring Kimmel completely. "To everyone watching at home, you deserve better entertainment than this. You deserve hosts who lift people up, not tear them down. And women everywhere deserve to be treated with respect, not turned into punchlines for someone else's career." The applause that followed was thunderous, sustained, and genuine. People were standing now, giving her an ovation that felt more like a political rally than a television taping. Kimmel sat helplessly at his desk, a broken man watching his empire crumble in real time. Aniston walked back to where she had been sitting and picked up her purse with deliberate calm. "I won't be finishing this interview," she announced, her voice carrying clearly over the applause. "And I won't be coming back to shows that treat women as targets instead of guests." With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her head held high and her dignity intact. The audience erupted in even louder applause, many people shouting words of support and encouragement. Some were openly crying, moved by witnessing someone finally stand up to a system they had always felt powerless to challenge. As Aniston disappeared behind the curtain, the cameras caught Kimmel sitting alone at his desk, looking smaller and more pathetic than anyone had ever seen him. The audience continued their applause for several more minutes, refusing to let the moment end. When they finally quieted down, the silence that followed was deafening. The show cut to an unscheduled commercial break, but the damage was already done. Within hours, the confrontation had gone viral across every social media platform. "Respect Jennifer Aniston" and "Kimmel must go" began trending worldwide as millions of people shared clips and expressed their support for her courageous stand. Major advertisers began pulling their sponsorship from Kimmel's show before the night was over. Network executives called emergency meetings. Other female celebrities started sharing their own stories of similar treatment, creating a domino effect that would reshape how talk shows operated. Jennifer Aniston had walked into that studio as a guest promoting her latest project. She walked out as a symbol of change, having delivered a masterclass in how to stand up to bullies with grace, strength, and unwavering dignity. The entertainment industry would never be quite the same.